Before wealth arrives, something else changes. First, there is a quiet moment that almost no one remembers. It never appears in biographies. It isn't photographed. No newspaper writes about it. Yet, it may be the most important moment in a person's financial life. It is the moment before anything changes, before the promotion, before the investment succeeds, before the business finally grows, before the unexpected opportunity arrives. It is the moment when nothing on the outside has changed at all, but something deep within begins to shift. Most people spend their lives believing the world must change before they can feel different. When I have enough money, then I'll relax. When my debts are gone, then I'll feel secure. When success finally arrives, then I'll believe in myself. It sounds reasonable. Almost everyone lives this way. But what if the order has been backwards all along? Um, what if security isn't the reward? What if it is the beginning? Stay with that question for a little while. Don't rush to answer it. Simply let it rest somewhere in the back of your mind as though you've planted a small seed whose purpose you don't yet understand. Because today's story begins with someone who knew nothing about great wealth. He wasn't born into influence. He didn't inherit a fortune. He wasn't surrounded by people who believed extraordinary things were possible. He grew up in a narrow street where every conversation about money sounded the same. We can't afford it. Maybe next year. People like us don't live that way. As a child, he accepted those words as facts. Children usually do. They don't question the stories handed to them. They simply wear them until one day they mistake them for their own thoughts. Years passed. He became an apprentice in a merchant's shop. Every morning he swept wooden floors, stacked heavy crates, counted other people's goods, watched customers spend amounts of money larger than his monthly wages without giving it a second thought. At first, those people fascinated him. Then they confused him. Eventually, they became a question. Why did money seem to move naturally toward some people while constantly escaping others? Surely they weren't all more intelligent. Many weren't. Some worked harder than they did. Others seemed surprisingly ordinary. Yet they carried themselves differently. Not proudly, not arrogantly, simply, calmly. They walked as though tomorrow would take care of itself. He couldn't explain it, but he noticed it. And sometimes noticing is the beginning of transformation. Each evening he walked the same road home. Halfway through that journey stood an enormous warehouse. To most people, it was simply another building. To him, it became something else entirely. He would stop, just for a minute, sometimes less. He'd study the old brick walls, the tall wooden doors, the faded sign hanging above the entrance. Then, quietly, without telling another soul, he imagined something impossible, his own name painted across the front. Not because he believed he could somehow force it into existence, not because he expected miracles, but because something about the image felt strangely familiar, as though he were remembering a future instead of inventing one. The feeling surprised him. He never told his family. His friends would have laughed. His coworkers would have reminded him to be realistic. So he kept the experience entirely to himself. Night after night. Nothing changed. The warehouse still belonged to someone else. His wages remained small, his clothes were worn, his life looked exactly the same. If someone had examined his circumstances, they would have found no evidence whatsoever that anything significant was happening. Yet every evening, while standing quietly outside that building, he performed an invisible act. He entered it in imagination. He walked across its timber floors. He unlocked the office. He greeted workers arriving for the day. He signed invoices. He looked through the upstairs window at the town below. He never imagined piles of gold. He never pictured extravagant luxury. Instead, he imagined something much quieter. Responsibility, steadiness, the peaceful rhythm of a life that no longer revolved around survival. He lingered there for only a few moments before returning home. Then he repeated the process the following evening, and the evening after that. Weeks became months. Nothing remarkable happened. That is usually the part people cannot tolerate. They imagine once, twice, perhaps for a week. Then they search desperately for evidence that something is changing. When no evidence appears, they quietly abandon the practice. Not because imagination failed, but because they handed authority back to appearances. They allowed the visible world to decide what was possible. The young apprentice chose differently. He wasn't trying to convince the world, he wasn't trying to manipulate events. He simply discovered that those few quiet moments each evening changed the way he felt for the rest of the night, and eventually, for the rest of the day. He noticed something curious. Problems that once frightened him no longer seemed overwhelming. He stopped speaking about money with bitterness. He became more generous, even when he had little. He listened differently. He carried himself differently. Without trying, his posture changed. His conversations changed. His decisions became calmer. He wasn't pretending to be wealthy. He was becoming someone who no longer believed lack was his identity. The difference is subtle, but it changes everything. Because the world rarely responds to what we occasionally wish. It responds over time to who we consistently believe ourselves to be. Most people wait for life to grant them permission to become peaceful, to become confident, to become grateful. But peace cannot be postponed until circumstances improve. Confidence cannot wait for proof. Gratitude cannot depend upon possession. These qualities are not prizes waiting at the finish line. They are the path itself. Imagine planting an oak tree. You would never dig it up every morning to check whether the roots had grown. You understand that growth happens where your eyes cannot see. The deepest work is invisible. The same is true of the mind. Every time you return to a new state of being, every time you quietly rehearse abundance instead of fear, you are extending roots beneath the surface. Nothing appears different until one day everything does. And that is where our journey truly begins. In part 2, we'll explore how the apprentice's inner transformation begins to reshape his daily decisions, leading naturally into the idea of the bridge of incidents, the seemingly ordinary events that eventually reflect his new state of mind. Part 2, the bridge no one sees. The strange thing about transformation is this: it rarely announces itself. There is no trumpet, no flashing sign, no morning when you wake up and suddenly declare, "Today I have become a different person." It happens quietly, like dawn. If you watch the horizon every second, you'll swear nothing is changing. And then, almost without noticing, the entire landscape is filled with light. So it was with the young apprentice. He continued sweeping floors. He continued balancing accounts that belonged to other men. He continued walking home each evening. Outwardly, nothing remarkable had happened, but inwardly, a silent revolution had begun. He no longer looked at successful people with envy. Instead, he studied them with curiosity. He no longer asked, "Why do they have what I don't?" He began asking, "What must it feel like to wake up and there is always enough?" That single question changed the direction of his life, because every question you repeatedly ask becomes an instruction to your mind. Ask, "Why am I always struggling?" And your mind will faithfully gather evidence. Ask, "How would the person I wish to become think about this?" And suddenly your imagination begins searching for an entirely different world. Few people realize they are questioning themselves into the very life they wish to escape. The apprentice unknowingly chose better questions. One afternoon, while arranging crates in the back of the shop, an elderly merchant arrived to inspect a shipment. The old man was known throughout the town, not because he was the richest, but because nothing ever seemed to disturb him. Markets rose, markets fell, ships arrived late, contracts collapsed, yet his voice never hurried. His eyes never carried panic. The apprentice watched him from across the warehouse. When the inspection ended, the merchant smiled and said, "You stack those crates as though they belong to you." The apprentice laughed. "They belong to my employer." The old man shook his head gently. "I wasn't talking about the crates." Before the apprentice could ask what he meant, the merchant had already climbed into his carriage and disappeared down the road. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds, yet it echoed in his mind for weeks. You stack those crates as though they belong to you. He realized something. Long before anyone else noticed the change, someone already had. Not because his circumstances were different, because his identity was. That is how life often works. The world detects changes in us before we consciously recognize them ourselves. A new confidence enters your voice. Your posture softens. Your eyes stop searching for approval. You listen more carefully. You speak with greater certainty. Without announcing it, you become someone people trust, and opportunities have a curious habit of finding those who appear ready for them, not through magic, through resonance. Imagine walking into two different rooms. In the first room, someone desperately tries to convince everyone they deserve success. Every sentence carries strain. Every smile asks for permission. Every conversation hides the fear of being overlooked. In the second room sits someone equally ordinary, but they are completely at ease. They don't compete for attention. They don't need to prove their worth. They ask thoughtful questions. They remain calm when others rush. When they speak, people naturally listen. Which person would you trust with responsibility? Which person would you invite into a partnership? Which person would you remember after leaving the room? The difference is rarely talent. It is presence. Presence is simply the outward expression of an inward state. This is why trying to change your life through force alone becomes exhausting. Force begins with fear. Identity begins with certainty. One says, I hope this works. The other quietly says, this is who I am becoming. There is tremendous power in that difference. The apprentice continued his evening ritual. Each night he stood before the warehouse. Each night he entered it in imagination. But something subtle began changing. He stopped asking, when will this happen? Instead, he found himself asking, how can I become worthy of caring for something like this? Notice the difference. One question demands a result. The other develops a character. One waits, the other grows. And life almost always rewards growth before results. Months passed. One rainy afternoon, a customer entered the shop looking for a shipment that had been misplaced. Everyone searched. No one could find it. Voices became tense. Accusations filled the room. The apprentice remained calm. He quietly remembered where he had noticed an incorrectly marked crate several days earlier. Within minutes, the missing shipment was found. The customer thanked the shop owner. The owner accepted the praise. The apprentice returned to sweeping the floor. Something inside him smiled, not because he received recognition, but because he realized he had acted differently. The old version of himself would have panicked with everyone else. This version stayed steady. He was becoming the man he had imagined, and becoming always comes before receiving. Think of a sculptor standing before a block of marble. To everyone else, it is only stone. To the sculptor, the finished statue already exists. The hammer does not create it. The hammer merely removes everything that does not belong. Perhaps your life is unfolding in much the same way. Perhaps you are not trying to create a wealthy version of yourself. Perhaps you are simply uncovering the one who has been waiting beneath years of fear, years of doubt, years of stories inherited from people who believed survival was all life could offer. What if abundance is less about acquiring something new and more about remembering something you've forgotten? The apprentice never considered himself extraordinary. He still had difficult days. He still worried at times. There were mornings when the old voice returned. What if nothing changes? What if you're wasting your imagination? Whenever those thoughts appeared, he noticed something remarkable. He no longer argued with them. He simply returned to the feeling. Not the picture, the feeling. The quiet certainty, the ease, the deep breath, the calm ownership. Because he had discovered a secret that many spend their entire lives missing. The image is only the doorway. The feeling is the home. You can imagine 1,000 grand houses, but if you continue feeling like the person standing outside the gate, the pictures remain pictures. It is the feeling that transforms imagination into identity, and identity quietly begins rearranging behavior. Behavior rearranges choices, choices rearrange circumstances. This is the bridge. Not a bridge built of miracles, but one built from ordinary days. One conversation, one decision, one unexpected meeting. One opportunity that would have gone unnoticed by the person you used to be. When people later call it coincidence, they are only seeing the final step. They never witnessed the bridge that carried you there. And perhaps, without even realizing it, yours has already begun. In part 3, we'll move from story into a deep, immersive guided meditation inspired by the principle of living from the end, helping the listener experience the quiet emotional state of already having enough. Part 3, Living from the End. There is a moment that separates imagination from daydreaming. Most people never notice it. They close their eyes, they picture the life they want, a beautiful home, financial freedom, a growing business, a peaceful future. Then, almost without realizing it, They open their eyes and return to the same familiar feeling of waiting. Waiting for the phone call, waiting for the opportunity, waiting for the money, waiting for life to begin. And because they continue living from the feeling of waiting, life faithfully gives them more reasons to wait. But there is another way. Imagine an actor preparing for the role of a king. He doesn't simply memorize the lines. He learns how a king walks, how a king listens, how a king sits in silence, how a king enters a room without needing to announce himself. By the time the curtain rises, he is no longer pretending. For those few hours, he inhabits another identity. Life asks something remarkably similar of us, not to pretend, but to inhabit, not to force, but to become. Because every outer experience begins as an inner relationship with yourself. Close your eyes if it feels comfortable. Allow the room around you to fade into the background. There is nothing you need to solve for the next few minutes. Nothing to fix, nothing to achieve. This is not a session about getting somewhere. It is about discovering that the place you've been trying to reach may already exist within you. Take a slow breath in through your nose, hold it gently. Now release it through your mouth. Again, breathe in a little more slowly this time. Imagine each breath creating space inside your chest, not empty space, peaceful space, the kind of spaciousness you notice when you are no longer rushing towards tomorrow. As you breathe out, allow the muscles around your eyes to soften. Relax your jaw, release your shoulders, let your hands rest naturally. Notice how much unnecessary effort the body quietly carries. Now imagine you are standing before a simple wooden door. There is nothing extraordinary about it. No gold, no marble, no grand entrance, just a familiar door. Yet something inside you knows that everything beyond it belongs to your future. Reach out. Place your hand upon the handle, feel its cool surface, take one slow breath, then gently open the door. On the other side is a quiet morning. Sunlight pours through large windows. The air feels calm, peaceful, safe. You recognize the room immediately, not because you've seen it before, because somehow it feels like home. Walk slowly through the room. Notice every detail, the wooden floor beneath your feet, the gentle light resting across the desk, the comfortable chair near the window. Perhaps there are books, perhaps a notebook, perhaps a cup of tea or coffee still sending thin streams of warmth into the air. Everything feels beautifully ordinary. Nothing is trying to impress you, because true abundance rarely needs to. Walk towards the desk. A laptop rests there. Its screen is awake. Without excitement, without anxiety, you glance at the financial figures displayed before you. Perhaps it is your business account, perhaps your savings, perhaps investments you've patiently built. Notice your reaction. There isn't one. You simply smile, very gently, then continue with your morning. That may surprise you. Many people imagine wealth as constant excitement, but excitement fades, peace remains, security feels wonderfully uneventful. It is the absence of constant calculation, the absence of nightly worry, the absence of fear every time the telephone rings or another bill arrives. Stay with that feeling, not excitement, ease. Take another slow breath. Now imagine your future self entering the room. They are not older by many years, perhaps only 3, perhaps 5, yet everything about them feels settled. Um, they carry themselves lightly. They are neither rushed nor lazy, neither proud nor apologetic. They simply belong to their own life. They notice you, they smile, then quietly sit beside you. For a few moments, neither of you speaks. There is no need. Finally, they turn towards you and ask a single question. Why have you been carrying so much weight that no longer belongs to you? Allow the question to settle. No need to answer immediately. Simply notice what rises. Perhaps you've been carrying fear inherited from your family. Perhaps you've been carrying old disappointments. Perhaps you've mistaken temporary circumstances for permanent identity. Whatever appears, simply observe it. Now your future self gently reaches towards you, not to give you money, not to hand you success. Instead, they remove an invisible backpack from your shoulders. You didn't even realize you were wearing it. Inside that heavy bag are years of worry, comparison, self-doubt, the belief that you must struggle before you deserve peace, the fear that there is never enough. Watch as your future self quietly places the backpack on the floor. You don't need this anymore, they say. Take another breath. Notice how your body responds. Your shoulders feel lighter, your breathing deepens, your chest opens. Nothing outside has changed. yet everything inside feels different. This is where many people misunderstand the process. They believe the outer world creates the inner feeling. Yet every meaningful change in history began inside someone's imagination before it became visible to everyone else. Every bridge existed first as a thought. Every cathedral first lived in someone's mind. Every great company began as an unseen possibility. Every invention was invisible until it wasn't. Part 4. The Quiet Harvest. Remain here for just another moment. Notice how different this silence feels from the silence you carried into this meditation. It isn't empty. It isn't uncertain. It is full, full of possibility, full of space, full of the quiet confidence that something within you has already begun to move. And perhaps that is the greatest misunderstanding about transformation. People expect to feel dramatically different. They expect fireworks. They expect certainty so overwhelming that every doubt disappears forever. Life rarely works that way. The oak tree does not become mighty in a single afternoon. The river does not carve a canyon in one storm. The sunrise does not rush the horizon. Everything meaningful unfolds with remarkable patience. So will this. Tomorrow morning you may wake up and for a moment the old thoughts will return. What if this is only wishful thinking? What if nothing changes? What if I've been here before? Do not fear those thoughts. They are echoes. Echoes always sound loudest after you've left the place where they were first spoken. You do not defeat an echo by shouting louder. You simply keep walking. Eventually, the echo fades. The new landscape becomes your reality. Imagine a violin resting in the corner of a room. If one string has been tightened far too much for years, loosening it feels strange at first. It almost feels wrong. The musician knows better. The string is not becoming weak. It is returning to its proper tension. Your mind works in much the same way. If you have rehearsed worry every day for 10 years, peace will initially feel unfamiliar. If you have rehearsed scarcity every morning, abundance may almost feel uncomfortable. Do not mistake unfamiliarity for falsehood. Sometimes the healthiest state feels unfamiliar simply because you have not lived there long enough. This is why the practice matters. Not once, not occasionally, but gently, faithfully, every day. Not because you are trying to persuade the universe, because you are educating your own consciousness. Each morning, before the world tells you who you should be, spend a few quiet moments remembering who you have chosen to become. Before checking your phone, before reading the headlines, before opening emails, return to that feeling, not the image, the feeling of enough, enough time, enough wisdom, enough opportunities, enough peace. Carry that feeling into ordinary moments, when paying for your morning coffee, when answering an email, when sitting in traffic, when speaking with family, when making decisions about money. Especially then, because identity is not formed during extraordinary moments. It is formed in ordinary ones. A single decision made from fear changes very little. Thousands of decisions made from fear quietly shape a lifetime. The opposite is equally true. Thousands of small decisions made from confidence, from patience, from trust, eventually become a completely different life. There is an old story about two gardeners. Each planted seeds on the same morning. The first gardener dug into the soil every few days to check whether anything was growing. Each time he disturbed the roots, he delayed the very growth he longed to see. The second gardener watered the earth, pulled weeds, protected the ground, then went about living his life. Weeks later, only one garden flourished. The lesson was never about gardening. It was about faith, not blind faith, patient faith, the kind that continues nourishing what cannot yet be seen. Perhaps your dream is a thriving business. Perhaps it is financial freedom. Perhaps it is freedom from debt. Perhaps it is simply waking each morning without the constant weight of worry. Whatever form abundance takes for you, treat it like a seed. Do not keep digging it up to ask whether it is working. Water it, protect it, live from it. Allow life the time to arrange the bridge you cannot yet see. One day, someone will call you fortunate. They will notice the successful business, the peaceful home, the opportunities that seem to appear from nowhere. They will say, "You were lucky." Smile. You need not correct them, because you will remember the truth. You will remember the ordinary mornings, the quiet evenings, the breaths you took when fear wanted to take over, the decisions nobody applauded, the identity nobody could see. That was where the miracle happened. Not outside, inside, long before the evidence arrived. And perhaps years from now, someone else will ask you how everything changed. You may tell them about a business idea, a conversation, an investment, a partnership. Those things mattered. But if you are completely honest, you will know the real answer. Everything changed the day you stopped waiting for abundance to give you peace and began allowing peace to welcome abundance. Take one final slow breath. Fill your lungs completely. Hold it for just a moment. Now release it gently. Feel your body resting exactly where it is. Notice the chair beneath you, the sounds around you, the quiet rhythm of your own breathing. You are here. This moment is enough. And from this moment, a new story can begin. Not because the world has changed, because you have. Carry this feeling with you today. When fear appears, breathe. When scarcity whispers, remember. When doubt knocks, answer with calm instead of panic. Little by little, day after day, the person you imagined will stop feeling like your future. They will become your present. And one ordinary morning, without fanfare, without fireworks, you will realize that the life you once visualized is simply the life you are living. If this meditation has helped you discover a little more peace, a little more trust, and a little more abundance within yourself, I invite you to continue this journey with us. Subscribe to Stories and Quotes Be, where every week we explore timeless wisdom, powerful stories, and guided reflections designed to help you transform your inner world, because every lasting change begins there. If today's message resonated with you, leave a comment with one simple word, enough. Not as a declaration that you've reached the end of your journey, but as a reminder that in this very moment, you already possess the inner foundation upon which every meaningful success is built. Until we meet again, walk gently, think abundantly, imagine lovingly, and remember, the life you consistently live within will, in its own perfect time, become the life you recognize without. Take care.